Good day, everyone. Praise be Jesus and Mary, now and forever. So, before we begin with our online class, let's take a moment to gather our thoughts and say a brief prayer.
Almighty God, you are the source of life. We thank you for all the blessings you have given to us. Thank you for giving us another day to learn something new. Clear our mind and help us focus. Guide us and our teacher as we study and create new learning experiences. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
We are going to discuss about the regional approach to literature. So, we are going to focus on the literatures that are found in the different regions in the Philippines. So, to start with, let us read this quote first. Let us remember that Metro Manila is not the Philippines and the Philippines is not Metro Manila. Other provinces and regions should share the resources as well. By Alan Peter Cayetano, 2014. Now, what does this mean? What does this statement mean? Is that when we think of Philippines, all we could think of is Manila. It's not just Manila that makes I want you to take note that it's not just Manila that makes up the vibrance of the Philippines, but instead, we have numbers of regions, right? That significantly contributed to the overall richness that we have, especially in terms of literature. So we have local writers, underrated and underappreciated. They are everywhere and still continue to thrive. They are contributing to our future through their writings. Unfortunately, no, because of the technological advancements, so we seem to overlook them. We fail to take the time to read what is uniquely ours. Even here in Tagum City, we have this fascinating and rich history that local writers or local historians have like diligently collected and published books. And we have this book here in Tagum, which is about the history of Tagum City, the rich history that we have, the stories that is recorded through this book, Kagikan. So I hope you are familiar with that and you have read that. Now, also, we have our local poets who use native languages, adding extra layer of somehow like for a pride or interest of making that makes their work stand out. Let's now talk about who are the prominent writers in Region 11. So, when we say Region 11, what region is that? We're talking about the Davao region. So, who are the prominent writers? Of course, we have a lot of writers, local writers here in the Davao region, but we are going to talk about just some of those prominent writers. And first, we have Dr. Macario D. Chu, a homegrown Mindanao scholar, historian, community poet, famous writer, editor, and a researcher for English and Visayan story, primary fiction, and verse. He is also a Palanca awardee. Ma'am, what is a Palanca awardee? I've heard a lot about that. So, Palanca awardee, when we say Palanca awardee, it's like Palanca Awards. So when we say the Palanca Awards in the Philippines, it is like this prestigious literary competition that recognizes the outstanding works of the writers in various categories, especially in terms of literature. So again, um, he is prominently a writer who injects, sorry for the typo error, historical context in his literary pieces. He is a well-known Bisaya translator. So again, Macario Chu is a Davao-based local writer, and he mainly writes about the history of Davao or Davao region, and is very ambitious about the narratives of his locality, ours. No, unfortunately, Mindanaoan writers are facing challenges. No, the writers here in Mindanao, local writers, they are facing challenges. That's why some of them are appreciated because mainly wala masyadong venues for publication. That's one of the reasons, the venue for publication. So except for the one or two Manila publications, and very few Mindanaoan writers get accepted there. So, the Imperial Manila, and again, as mentioned earlier, medyo mas focused sila, the capital city, sa ilahang own industrialization. And other reason is the lack of readership. So when we say readership, wala masyadong nagbabasa because we all know Filipinos, us, we have this colonial mentality. There are very few readers, and those who do, they usually buy the popular now Western books. Aminin. So if you are a reader and you have noticed na most of your books are from the Western na mga literature, on most of the books that you are interested with are those books with that has like mga covers nga nice. So yeah. So let's move on to another prominent writer. We have Errol A. Marquita, UP Mindanao alumnus who won a first prize in the 2015 Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards, the Palanca Awards for Literature. He is a freelance contemporary writer who injects this time societal issues. If Dr. Macario Chu is for history and the narratives, he is not just only focusing on history but also narratives of the his locality. So for Errol Merquita, he talks about or he mainly focuses on the societal issues. So please take note in that. Now let's try to read one of his works, Unsaon Pagpatay sa Ok-ok. So please read it with me. Unsaon Pagpatay sa Ok-ok by Errol A. Marquita. Pag-andam og tsinelas, kanang baga, kanang malaparo. Pag-andam og tirungan, kanang talinis, kanang taas. Pag-andam og silhig ug sako, kanang dako, kanang lapad. Tuktoka sa iyang panimalay. Kung makita nimong gakamang-kamang ang mga ok-ok sa boulevard, hinahinayag duol, unya kalit walo pa sa baga nga tsinelas. Kung makaikyas unya musukol ang inahak, kuhaa ang tirungan. Tusuka sa lungag kay tingali misuksok sa barangay 23-C. Tusuka gyud hangtod madunggan nimong napislat iyang lawas. Unya kuha dayon kag silhig, hipusa, tapuka, isulod sa sako, panaghuy murag daw sa waay. Inig kadlawon ilabay sa kasagbutan, ug aron mahimangnuan ang tanan, butangi og pasidaan. Ok-ok ako, wag niyong tularan. Okay, so, ano pa? Sayon rapat yun ang mga gagmayng ok-ok. Pero kung ginagko na insekto na gani, ayaw patya. Kay istudyuhan pa. So, that is the work of Errol Marquita. So, what can you infer based on the poem? What could you imagine while reading the poem? What scenarios can you make up in your mind while reading it? Is it familiar? Are the terms familiar? Or is the scene familiar? I think I've seen this scene before, like that. So, so again, as mentioned earlier sa iyahang biography that Errol Merquita talks about mainly about the societal issues. By Errol Merquita addresses the theme of what do you think is the theme of the poem? Killing the cockroaches. Okay, so the theme here is killing the cockroaches, which metaphorically compares them to the issue such as the drug syndicate and extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. I hope you are familiar with that. So, katong mga tokhang, the tokhang yu. So the poet utilizes these vivid imagery. When we say vivid, that means it's clear. So the author utilizes this vivid imagery to describe the preparations kung giunsa pagpatay ang ok-ok and what to use. It's very clear, right? It's very detailed how the imagery is portrayed there. It uses mga chinelas, mga tirungan, sako, and it's very relatable. Also, the act of killing the cockroach is presented in a detailed or meticulous process to the point that it kind of like stimulates something in our brain, a scenario or a mental picture in our brain, involving the careful planning and the execution as well. Yun sa siya pagpatay. So, the author tries to use this ok-ok as a symbolism to symbolize the, what do you think, the people or the drug addicts. And kung unsa ra sila kadali gipang patay. So we all know a lot of families were grieving and protesting against the government for the number of people or maybe innocent people being killed and thrown everywhere sa streets here sa Philippines na nakabalot og sako with a signboard na drug addict ako, wag tularan. So, no, murara og uk-uk ang mga tao ato kay dali ra kayo sila pamatyon. So, as for the type of poetry, what type of poetry is this? So again, we have discussed that there's the two types of literature, the prose and poetry, and poetry has different types as well. What are those three types? We have dramatic, narrative, and lyrical poetry. Now, what type of poetry is this? It's narrative poetry. Now, ma'am, the poem somehow it appears to be written in a straightforward and simple style, no? So parang its structure somehow lacks these complex na poetic devices. Very simple lang ang language ng gigamit. So why do you think so? It somehow looks very ordinary. Para siyang di poem. So I think though that this is one of his way of artistically expressing a narrative. So it's very clear that it's a narrative because it has this plot, the beginning, middle, and then an end. This artistic expression would make the language accessible for the general public. So just so you know, poets have their what we call the poetic license, where they somehow have the freedom to deviate from this conventional rules. So it's the this rules, the traditional way of writing, itong very structured. And again, we are in the 21st century world of literature with 21st century writers. So amazing, right? Now, let's move on to Luzon. We are done with Mindanao writers. Let's move on to Luzon. Yes, Luzon is the largest and most populous island in the Philippines, located in the northern portion of the Philippine archipelago. Ma'am, what is archipelago? So why is Philippines called an archipelago? So since Philippines is called an archipelago because it is comprised of vast group of islands scattered across the western Pacific Ocean. How many islands do we have here in the Philippines, ma'am? So the Philippines consists of approximately like 7,641 islands during low tide. Pero if during high tide, around 7,107 islands. So the exact number may vary slightly because of the tidal conditions and other factors. So, ma'am, since we're talking about regions, how many regions are there in the Philippines? Philippines is divided into, what do you think? 17 regions. Okay. So, it is the economic and political center of the nation, being home to the country's capital city, Manila, as well as Quezon City, the country's most populous city. So, Luzon's population, speaking of, as of May 1, 2020, they have over 12,422,172 people living there, according to the 2020 Census of Population and Housing, or the PSA, or the Philippine Statistics Authority. And what are the major regional languages that they speak there? So these are just the major regional languages. We have Tagalog, Ilocano, Kapampangan, Bicolano, Pangasinense. So how many languages do we have here in the Philippines? We have over 170 or 180 languages. That's how linguistically diverse we are here in the Philippines. So, if we talk about dialect, mga 111 dialects. Again, when we say Cebuano, Cebuano is a language, and Cebuano has its variants as well. So, we call those variants the dialects. So, as what you can see, as what you can observe, there are different types of Bisaya. No, natin Bisaya, ang Bisaya nato, na Davao Bisaya, and lots of forms of Bisaya. Sa Surigao, they speak different type of Bisaya, so they are dialects. Now, before we move on to reading some of the works or the prominent writers or one of the prominent writers found in Luzon, let's have a tour first. Mag-tour sa maglag sa Luzon. Let's go. Okay,
It's
so
for fun with you.
enjoy mo. Char. So that's for Luzon. So have you been to Luzon? Good for you, Char. So let's move on. Let us now have a piece from Luzon, which is entitled Casalo by Joy Barrios. Joy Barrios is one of the writers or the prominent writers of Luzon. So let's try to read this. Author behind that masterpiece, Casalo, which is Joy Barrios. Joy Barrios is known for her roles as a poet, activist, scriptwriter, actress, translator, and educator. She's a Palanca Award winner and gained prominence as a freedom activist during the Marcos dictatorship. Recognized by critic Virgilio Almario, she currently serves as a visiting professor at the University of California, Irvine. So, let's try to read as well the notable works of Joy Barrios, which includes Ang Pagiging Babae ay Pamumuhay sa Panahon ng Digma, Prince Charming at iba pang nobelang romantiko, Baylaya, Mga Dula para sa Kababaihan. Let's read it together. Kasalo by Joy Barrios. Ang babae ay hindi kaning inihahain sa mesa ng matrimony. Iniluluwa kapag mainit at takot kang mapaso. Sinasabawan ng kape sa umaga kapag ikaw ay nagkulang. At tinatapong tutong sa kanyang pagtanda. Ang babae ay hindi karneng dinuduro at kinikilo. Ginigisa ang laman sa iyong mga pangako. Nilalaga ang buto sa iyong pagsuyo at ginagawang chicharon ang balat upang maging pulutan. Ang babae ay hindi halayang panghimagas sa iyong kabusugan, inumin sa iyong katandaan, o putahing nilalaspag tuwing may handaan. May tiyan din siyang kumakalam, may sikmurang kailangang mapunan, at pusong dapat mahimasmasan. Kasama mo siyang nagtatanim ng maisasaing, katuwan na naghahanda ng almusal, tanghalian at hapunan, kaharap at kasalo sa kinabukasan. That is for the work of Joy Barrios, which is entitled Casalo. So it's a poem. So this work of Joy Barrios serves as a literary weapon of women against people who do not know their importance. The author wrote different poems and some really tackle about women empowerment. The poem does not signify opposing man and woman, but it is more on somehow giving men several tips on how they could or should treat women. So that is for her work. Now let's try to dissect or try to analyze, critique this poem by analyzing or understanding, citing the literary devices that are used by the author. So let's talk about the different literary devices. These are just some of the many literary devices. So we are going to talk about persona, senses and imagery, which includes visual, olfactory, gustatory, tactile and auditory, symbolism, and diction. So, ma'am, what is persona? Persona comes from the Latin term persona, which means the mask. So when we say the mask, what does that mean? So para kang may suot na maskara, you are not portraying yourself, but so persona is like a character that you create or take on for a particular situation. So you wear this mask for a particular situation. Now, how do we cite or how do we identify if it's who is the persona in a poem or in a narrative? So you ask these questions. Who is the speaker of the piece? Very easy, right? So aside from that, who is the one being talked about in the piece? So if it answers that question, then that is the persona. It's like the subject or the person that is being talked about in the piece, the subject of the narrative. So in the poem Kasalo, the voice of the persona is a woman, or the persona is a woman who in general has felt the experience of being abused, a woman who persuades people how a female should be properly treated in our society, and a woman desperate to be an equal partner in the context of matrimony. So for imagery, what is imagery? I've heard so much about that, but I think it's still very confusing. Now let's try to make things simpler this time. So let me ask you, how many senses do we have? Of course, we have the five senses. And what are these? We have the sense of taste, hearing, smell, touch, and vision, or the seeing. So for imagery, have you experienced that when you're reading something, or a book, a novel, a story, a short narrative, a poem, you create scenarios in your head. You have this imagination or this like movie scene in your head that you create while reading it word for word, while reading a novel. So that's the imagery working there. That's the way of the author to stimulate something in your minds, to stimulate so the what we call the mental pictures. So the imagery is there. The authors use this technique, this device to create mental pictures, to stimulate pictures in the minds of the readers. So what is its purpose? Its purpose is to make their literary pieces appealing and relatable to the readers. So with this imagery, somehow it creates this connection of the author and the reader para mas ma-relate so, reader, what the author is trying to tell there, what the author wants you to feel. So, that's for imagery. Now we have, let's try to discuss this one by one. A review lang siya. Everything is very obvious now. When we say taste, everyone say gustatory. Gustatory. Sense of taste, in other words, is gustatory. It's what the writer wants you to taste. It describes how a certain substance tastes like salty, bitter, sweet, acidic, delicious, and it is expressed through words. Even though it is expressed through words, we can really say if that is salty, bitter, sweet, if that food is salty, if that food is sweet, if it's delicious or acidic. Next is we have the sense of hearing or the auditory imagery. What the writer wants you to hear. It talks about music, noise, and even silence. Now, let's move on to the sense of smell, or in other words, olfactory imagery. What the writer wants you to smell. It usually exhibits good fragrance or bad odors. Next is the sense of touch, or in other words, the tactile imagery. What the writer wants you to touch or feel. So this can be about temperature, texture. When we say temperature, hot and cold, texture soft or rough, and movement. So this is an example. Next is we have the sense of sight or the visual imagery, vision. What the writer wants you to see. It usually talks about colors, shapes, sizes, patterns. It tells us how big this thing is, how small it is, what is its pattern, is it vertical, is it horizontal. So we can see or we can create mental pictures just by reading because of the author through the words of the author. So again, that is imagery. It is the language or the words that the authors use or the poets use, novelists, to create images in the minds of the reader para makastimulate tayo ng imagination or scenarios in our head. So, for this part, I want you to take a piece of paper, any piece of paper, and then a pen, and then you write your answer. So this will serve as your quiz as well. This would be an indicator that you actually are watching the video. So, may 5 points ka na. This is a 5-point drill. I want you to transfer this your answer, to the official or the original na assessment that I will post later after this video. So, you will include that 5-item quiz sa back part of your paper, okay? So, let's start. You will identify what sense is the author appealing to here, okay? So, let's start with number 1, the birds were singing melodies in the morning. The birds were singing melodies in the morning. Next, tiny emerald leaves drifted in the afternoon sunshine. What is the sense the author appealing to here? What could we think of here? Next is she gently stroked her silk scarf. She gently stroked her silk scarf. What is the appeal here? Next is when I bit the lemon, its citrus flavor shocked my tongue. Last, I think, is spring roses fill the kitchen with a subtle floral perfume. So that would be for the quiz. Congratulations, you have gained 5 points for listening and for watching the video. Next is Symbolism. So we've heard about this a lot. What is symbolism, Jude? So a symbolism is an artistic and poetic movement or style using symbolic images and indirect suggestion to express ideas, emotions, and states of mind. This can be in a form of an object, an idea, or a person. So let's try to simplify things. What is the base word of symbolism? That is symbol. When we say symbol, what could we think of? We could think of a sign. As kanang symbol means a sign, an object. So let's read this. Symbolism is the use of, again, the base word, symbols to represent ideas or qualities. Let's take this for an example. Red there is the symbol. The symbol symbolizes love. So again, this symbol that we are talking about has its hidden meaning. We extract meaning out from it. There is an implied meaning from that symbol. So that is the purpose of symbolism. Like for example, in the poem, it uses the color red. So for red, it's not just about the mere or the surface definition of it, which is a color. So red is just a color, part of the color wheel. But red there symbolizes something. It means love. It could mean love. When we say green, green is a symbol that has its implied meaning, and it could mean it symbolizes growth. When we say dove, it's an object or it's an animal. It symbolizes something else. It's not just a dove that is a bird, but instead it symbolizes peace, purity. So that is for symbolism, the use of symbols to represent ideas or qualities. I hope everything is clear here. So for the Kasalo or for the piece written by Joy Barrios, symbolism could be found here. Let's try to read. Ang babae ay hindi kaning inihahain sa mesa ng matrimony. Iniluluwa kapag mainit at takot kang mapaso. Sinasabawan ng kape sa umaga kapag ikaw ay nagkulang at itinatapong tutong sa kanyang pagtanda. So what are the highlighted words there? We have the kaning and tutong. So what is the base word of kaning? It's kanin or kanon. So these are the symbolisms that are used. So kumbaga, these are the symbols used. What are these symbolisms meant? What are the meanings of these words? So the kanin, if we try to look at its dictionary, by definition, kanin means freshly cooked rice. Tutong means burnt rice or na pagod na kanon. So we have this what we call also the denotation and the connotation. So when we say denotation, please take note on this. I will be including this as part of the quiz. So when we say denotation, letter D, denotation, it's the meaning based on dictionary, the meaning of that object based on the dictionary. So for kanin, the denotation of kanin is freshly cooked rice, but its connotation is its implied meaning. So, unsay implied meaning sa kanin? So for example, see, let's go back to the color red. So if we define it by dictionary, it's a color, but its connotation is different. Its connotation is that it means or it symbolizes love. It means love. A red means love. So that is its connotation. So for tutong, it means its denotation is burnt rice. But tutong, based on the kasalo, the poem, is different. It means differently. So the images of the objects above symbolize the state of value of a woman when she ages. So that is for symbolism. I hope everything is clear about what connotation and denotation is. Denotation, what are their difference? So let me try to spell it out. Denotation is spelled as Denotation. Denotation. So connotation, letter C. So you look that up sa Google. I will be including that as part of the quiz, okay? So those were the literary devices that we have discussed. We started with persona, the mask, senses and imagery, the five senses, visual, olfactory, gustatory, tactile, and auditory, the symbolism to represent meaning, and diction, or the use of symbol to represent something else, and diction, or the denotation and the connotation. So let's move on to feminism. Feminism is a range of socio-political movements and ideologies that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. Feminism holds the position that societies prioritize the male point of view and that women are treated unjustly in this society. So I want you, for this part, for feminism, I want you to read this video that I have recorded a year ago back when I was in college. So I talked about feminism, and one of the prime movers of feminism, that is Ellen Showalter. So I want you to read that, the lecture video entitled Ellen Showalter's Contribution to Feminism, and I will post the YouTube link, or I will send the YouTube link to your president, and then your president will send it to your group chat. Okay, so for the last part of this video, you will be answering this. So this is the video, by the way. I will just send you the link. So I kind of like regretted my looks here. So whatever, passes fast. The important thing there is the content. Don't laugh at me. Don't make fun of me. Okay. So we have here the assessment. So for the assessment, it's a bullet essay in one whole sheet of intermediate paper. Intermediate paper. Answer the questions presented as short and as concise as possible. Each item is worth 5 points, 3 points for accuracy of the content, and 2 points for the grammatical convention. So these are the questions. You will submit your papers. I will be collecting your papers by the time that the suspension of classes will be lifted. Okay? So hopefully you will really answer this. For question one, what is feminism in your context? How is imagery used in the poem? How is symbolism used in the poem? How is the persona used in Kasalo? And how can the regional approach to the Philippine literature be a better version of understanding literature in general? Okay, so that would be all for our discussion, class. I have a kanang confession. Kabalo ba mo nga ikaduhan ako ng video ani? Lahi ako sa nina gani nag-video. Nahuman ko og video pero wala di siya na-save. So mo nagdali ko. So I hope nga maminogid mo. Kaya effort kay ko ani. So goodbye everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Heart, heart, heart. Love, love, love.